Wonderful seeing some familiar faces and some new ones that I'm not used to seeing here on Zoom. We have Vietnam Marine, George Hott with us. Hey, George, good to see you. I see we have Mortimer again, Mortimer from Canada. Thank you so much for sending your information. Bob Miller from Millinocket, Maine, World War II veteran. Thank you for joining us, Bob. And we have Dave Seaver, soon to be retired Dave Seaver. Or are you retired? No, not yet. Soon to be retired. We'll unmute you when you retire. Not before then. Good evening, everybody. My name is Todd DiPastino. I am the executive director of the Veterans Breakfast Club. And this is our weekly program, VBC Happy Hour, where we get together and have conversations about the military experience, past and present. You never quite know who you're going to meet or the stories that you're going to hear. We try to cover a big range of experiences, branches of service, eras. And this week begins really a week of special programming, not only for the Veterans Breakfast Club, but in places around the country for the 70th anniversary of the end of the Korean War. The peace that came, or the end, the agreement, I should say, that was come to on July 27th, 1953, in Panmunjom, right on the 38th parallel. Was much, much less than a peace. It was just a ceasefire. And so the war continues and has continued and has taken hundreds of American lives since 1953, thousands of South Korean lives. And we start the commemoration of the Korean War and also kind of honoring those Americans who have fought in Korea since. I've learned the numbers from Susan Key. I've learned the number is probably about 3 million Americans have served in Korea, defending the southern part of that peninsula since 1953. And we're doing some special programming. And with that in mind, we're welcoming Bob Harbula, a Marine who served in Korea in 1950, 1951. He was there for the landing at Incheon on September 15th, 1950. He fought in the Battle of Seoul. And then he fought at the legendary, iconic Battle of the Chosen Reservoir. Bob, how are you doing?
Pretty good.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Bob is, as everybody knows, I think anybody who subscribes to the VBC magazine, that Bob's story is our cover story for the summer issue of our VBC magazine. And so he shares the story beautifully in print, and we thought we'd have him come on live and share it with us tonight. We also have a couple other special guests. We have Susan Key joining us. She's going to say a few words in a little bit from Arizona. And as always, we have Sean Hall. How are you doing, Sean, our director of programming?
I'm great. You know, I had the chance to talk with Bob at length at one of our last in-person events. And I kind of laid the groundwork there that if you are going to get the whole story, you need to come on tonight. So I hope some people are joining us from that. But I've been very excited for this program for over a month.
Yeah, you know, it is one thing to read a story, and it's quite another to hear the story kind of from the person's mouth. And that's what we wanted to do tonight with Bob. So thank you, Bob, for coming on. And thank you, Kathy Harbula, who I've just met, his daughter, who joined us, and Scott Harbula, Bob's son, who helped get him set up here on Zoom. I do want to thank our sponsor, Tobacco-Free Adagio Health. They sponsor VBC Happy Hour every week. They underwrite our efforts here, and they have been doing so for some time. You know, they're a nonprofit committed to the health and welfare of women and families, especially. But they have a special program, Tobacco-Free Adagio Health, that focuses on the hazards of tobacco use. They encourage people to quit smoking and to reduce smoking if they can, reduce tobacco use. They advocate for safer places to live, work, and play, and they educate Americans about the hazards of tobacco use. We encourage people to check out what Tobacco-Free Adagio Health does by going to their website, tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. That's tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. If you are a smoker and you're looking to quit, check out the PA free quit line, 1-800-QUIT-NOW. That's 1-800-QUIT-NOW. We have some pretty cool programs coming up, especially this one on Thursday here. It's going to be an in-person program at the Heinz History Center here in Pittsburgh, but we're also going to stream it. And The event is really twofold. It's certainly to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the end of the Korean War, which again happened on July 27th, 1953 in Panmunjom in that smart Spartan low-slung building. You've seen pictures of it, maybe. The two sides kind of signing this armistice agreement, barely looking at each other. And that was the end of a brutal 3-year war on the Korean peninsula. We want to commemorate the end of that shooting war by having two very special Korean War veterans. Bob Harbula once again will be here in person. So if you want to meet Bob in person, you could do so Thursday night in Pittsburgh. And we also have Dwayne Myers, who was a Navy frogman. And he was landed onto North Korean shores by a submarine, got into combat, was wounded and evacuated by submarine. He has quite a story to tell. And he's going to be there live in person sharing his story. And then we also want to kind of honor and recognize all those veterans who have served in Korea since 1953. So what we're going to do is have our own kind of pinning ceremony where every defender of Korea, every Korean War veteran who served from, say, 1950 until the present, who's there in the room, will receive a pin and a certificate. If you're not there in the room, we will put it in the mail to you and we'll recognize you by name. It's something that we did and was very meaningful for Vietnam Veterans Day. And it's something that I think our Korean War veterans deserve, whether you served during the war or not. So this will be July 27th. It'll be streamed on our YouTube channel, on our Facebook, and on our Zoom right here at 6:30 p.m. We look forward to it. We do request that you register for this program so that we know where to send the certificate, where to send the pin, and what names we want to have on those certificates and who we want to recognize. So you could go to our website. Sean, you could share the link maybe to the Eventbrite site or to our website, and so people could sign up. A week from tonight, we'll be back with our next VBC Happy Hour. It's a long overdue open conversation. We are going to talk about cluster munitions going to Ukraine and the history of cluster bombs. I know a lot of our veterans here have had experiences with them. Maybe we'll get into some flag etiquette. We're going to welcome Peggy Lynn Kelly and Adib Sabri, who had an impromptu reunion 50 years after this photo on the left in the background was taken. Here they are recently, when they just happened to run into each other in Washington, D.C. They're going to come on and share their stories. And then we have a kind of a mystery that we want to solve that comes from the newspaper, the Philadelphia Inquirer. There is a Marine in Philadelphia who wants to identify and locate this Marine pictured here on the right. We believe his name is Richard L. Henry. He saved the life of the Marine in Philadelphia. And we're going to get that story. We're going to get the reporter on and talking about the story and how we might track this Marine down. So, you know how open conversation is kind of you bring the subject, we provide the platform. We have a lot of questions and things we love to talk about. We know that you do also. So feel free to bring your subjects up with us next week, and we'll do it all on open conversation. All right. Well, thank you again for holding through those announcements. Susan Key, thank you for joining us all the way from Arizona, where it's still the afternoon. I should let people know that Susan is a wonderful Korean War historian. She's originally from Korea, and she's made it. She did something remarkable, and I'm just going to say this because you probably won't say it yourself. She caught the bug that I did. Which is this kind of obsession with veterans and with getting their stories and with being part of the veterans community, even though they didn't serve. And you did what I did, Susan, is you quit your job. You were well employed with a good job, and you quit it to do this full time, really to kind of thank Korean War veterans for saving your country. And it's quite a wonderful thing that you've been doing, and you've taught me a lot about the Korean War. So thank you for joining us, Susan, tonight.
Well, thank you, Todd. I really appreciate the opportunity to join this group today and to hear Mr. Harbula's experiences as a Marine in the Korean War in some of the worst battles that took place at the onset of the war. And he was in all of them from what I have read here. So it is a tremendous honor for me to meet Mr. Harbula and to hear of his experience. I just want to join this program today to hear Mr. Harbula, to meet him, but also to commemorate and help us all remember that this is a very important week for our Korean War veterans. As Todd referred to, July 27th is the 70th anniversary of the Korean War Armistice Agreement. Now, the Armistice Agreement is not a peace treaty. It was a military agreement to put a ceasefire into effect. So technically, the Korean War is not over, but it was military commanders that ultimately signed for a ceasefire to bring an end to the firing of the war. And so that is why North Korea continues to be such a hostile enemy to the United States and the rest of the world. So I am here, most importantly, to express my gratitude to Mr. Harbula, Korean War veterans, families who lost their loved ones in the Korean War, and all of our Korea defense veterans who have served after the war to defend that freedom that our veterans fought so hard for. I really feel that as a Korean American, that I need to represent the voice of those that America has helped save. I am a descendant of survivors of those that Mr. Harbula and so many others helped save. My parents were teenagers during the war. And I grew up, I was born in Korea. I grew up in the United States for most of my life. As Todd referred to, I was in the corporate world, not really thinking much about the Korean War, although my father is a Korean War veteran himself. He fought in the Korean War. After fleeing North Korea, he joined the South Korean Army and fought against communists because my family had a deep hatred for communists for everything that they took away from the North Korean people. So it was only 10 years ago that I was directed to this new journey to seek out Korean War veterans, to learn their stories, and most importantly, to thank them and honor them, and to help them see that the Korean people have not forgotten them. We can never forget our Korean War heroes who saved us. We have our life, we have our freedoms because of them. And every day that I wake up, I know that my life is possible because of God and because of our Korean War veterans from America. I know that 21 United Nations served, but America did the most and sacrificed the most. It is undoubtedly because of America's leadership that South Korea exists today. And so I just wanted to again reiterate my heartfelt thanks to all veterans who have served in Korea. And I don't know if in your audience you have any families of fallen, but I have also met many families whose loved ones are still missing in action. There's still 7,500 missing from the Korean War. And so these families still live in that war. For them, the war is not over either, even though, technically we're still at war. Those families live in that war every day. And so having learned so much from Korean War veterans like Mr. Harbula, I've interviewed many veterans from the 1st Marine Division who fought in the Battle of Chosin, the Inchon Landing, Operation Killer, Spring Offensive, the subsequent wars, the outpost battles along the DMZ. So from having learned so much from our veterans, from our Gold Star families, I know so deeply in my heart how much Americans truly sacrifice to give us our freedoms. And for that, I know that we Koreans can never pay that back. But I will do everything I can in the capacity that I can to preserve the legacy of our Korean War veterans and to be the voice of the Korean people to America, to thank America for being so courageous to fight for others' freedoms. And that courage and that sacrifice was not wasted. South Korea is prosperous, strong nation today and is a testament to what Mr. Harbula and others have given to us. So I just want to be a continual reminder and a voice to their courage and to what they have given to us. So I just thank you so much, all of you, for joining this program in honor of our Korean War veterans. And I join you in really giving respect and honor to Mr. Harbula here as he shares his story. Thank you so much, Todd. God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Susan, thank you so much. Your voice is so important for two reasons, I think. Number one, the Korean War is something we call here the Forgotten War. It's a war that was most remote from the folks back home here in the US, less so than the Vietnam War, which wasn't popular, but at least Americans knew it was going on, or World War II, which of course had the full force of the country behind them. The Korean War was very much soft-pedaled by officials for good reasons. They didn't want to spark World War III right there 5 years after World War II was over. But what it meant was that Americans didn't really follow what the war was going on. And then when they did hear news, it wasn't good. And so the Korean War kind of acquired, and I think even during Vietnam, the Korean War retroactively kind of acquired this bad reputation. And so not only, Susan, are you kind of bringing to light this episode of our world history that doesn't get much attention, but you're re-educating, I think, people like me and others who had a kind of a negative view of the outcome of the war, because the goal was the reunification of the country. That didn't happen, but it saved South Korea, and those who fought helped save the country that you came from. So thank you so much, Susan.
Well, I just want to hit on one point you just mentioned. I really do believe that, the Korean War is the forgotten victory, because South Korea was invaded by North Korea. We didn't start the war, they did. And so the main objective for America has always been to save South Korea. In that objective, they succeeded. It was never to go and to try to take over North Korea. Now, of course, that came about as MacArthur decided to cross the 38th and try to see if he can get North Korea. But the main objective of the UN forces responding to the aggression from North Korea was to save South Korea. And in that, America was successful, and so were the UN forces. So in that way, it is a victory. And I think South Korea is one of the countries that can really be the loudest and the biggest testament to America's victory. It really is a victory. When you look at North and South Korea, look at the huge difference between North and South. If that isn't a victory, looking at South Korea's success as a country, as an economic power, how could that not be a victory? So, and the fact that I'm here,
Yes.
My family was saved, and my family had escaped North Korea even. So, again, I am forever grateful. And I see that Mr. Kaliba is also on your Zoom session. I know he's a Korean War veteran. Mr. Kaliba, I don't know if you remember talking to me. I think I spoke to you once on the phone. So nice to see you, sir.
Nars Kaliva, yep, he'll be part of our program that we do on September 4th with other Korean War veterans. And we have Mort Lightstone also from Canada. He's a Canadian veteran of the Korean War.
Oh, wow. Nice to meet you, sir. What an honor to meet you, sir. I've met only a few Canadian Korean War veterans. Nice to see you.
Yeah, there aren't many of them, and he has a really interesting story to share. I'm hoping that we also get another chosen Marine on, Ken Santor, who lives in Nevada. Beth Ruschel connected us with him. I know Beth is on. If you're on, let us know. We'd love to have you chime in. Hey, Bob, how are you?
Good.
Are you still awake after that long introduction?
It was interesting. I loved hearing her talk about it.
Isn't it great? Isn't it great? I mean, let me start your story kind of towards the end, just because we've been talking about this idea of a forgotten war. I'm so struck how after you went through the Korean War and the unbelievable combat that you experienced, you came home and couldn't really talk about it with anyone.
Yeah, nobody knew, nobody cared. And I didn't speak to anybody from my company, the guys I fought with for 40 years. And it was only because the Scott was in the Air Force in Germany, and he called me and said, Dad, your company is having a reunion in Seattle. This was 1990. And so he gave me the phone number, and I was with them for like 29 years. And then after that, again, meeting all the guys that I fought with. And we really, it was a strange situation. We didn't know these guys. I didn't know them. They were out in California. That's where the division was, in California. And I was like a stranger coming into their outfit. And then after all the casualties we had in Seoul and the replacements, we have all new guys again. And I don't ever remember playing a softball game or going out to have a drink with any of these guys. It was like a lost world for me after I left there. Nobody wanted to talk about it.
Right.
But I did enjoy something that Susan said about how Korea is today, because I got the honor of going back to Korea in 2000, the 50th anniversary of the start of the Korean War. And when I got there, I was shocked. I thought I was in Las Vegas. When I was there the first time, there were grass huts and thatch roof houses and no sewers. And it was quite a difference when I got back there in 1950. And then we went to Incheon, where we landed, and they had a big ceremony there. And in the United States, we don't have any monuments about the Korean War. But in Incheon, they have one of the biggest monuments I've ever seen, mostly about the Marines. And we were their guests there, and we'd walk through the streets, and they knew that we were the Marines that fought there. And there was only two of us. It just got through a typhoon had hit the town when we got there, and it hit us when we were landing. We got hit by a typhoon. I mean, it must be typhoon season or something. But I remember us going up there in the Yellow Sea in these LSTs, and the typhoon hits. And I don't know if you've ever been in a LST during a typhoon. Your life is on the line. Every wave, it would go up in the air, and then it would go bum, 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 and back up in there. And we were all seasick, thrown up in there was no beds. I mean, the sergeants had all the bunks in that. And we had two companies on there, and there was only room for one. And so that was our introduction to Korea, was through the typhoon. We were so happy to get off those ships that we could have attacked anybody. But we were so unprepared for Korea that we were thrown together, and we had no special training. I never made a landing practiced a landing off an Amtrak or a landing craft. And nobody else did for this landing, because we didn't have a beach to land on. We had to climb up this seawall, and we had to build our own ladders. There it is. That's how we had to get up there on that seawall and climb up there. And we all had over 100 pounds on our back. I was an ammo carrier in the machine gun section. And we all had to carry, all the ammo carriers had to carry 4 cans of ammo. And they weigh about close to 20 pounds apiece, plus your own gear and your food and your own weaponry. And we had to climb these ladders. And I don't remember any of them breaking. That's a tribute to us as carpenters because we were loaded down. But we had no training for any of this. Like we had no trouble because we had good leaders. The one thing we knew, we had to follow our sergeants, and like Rocco Zula was our first sergeant. Even the officers listened to him when he talked. He was the boss. And he showed us how to do things. He wouldn't say, go do this. He would say, let's do this. And he'd take you and show you how to fight a war. That's where we learned how to combat. Then we went into Seoul, and we had no house-to-house training about fighting in Seoul. And they counterattacked, the North Koreans counterattacked us in Seoul. And they had a regiment against our 200 Marines. But we took care of them. But they just kept coming and coming. I never seen so many people wanting to die. But we took care of them there, but we had a lot of casualties too. And then the big mistake that MacArthur made was taking us out back to Incheon and going around to make a landing up at Wonsan, because the North Koreans that were below us were running for their lives to get back to North Korea. And all we had to do was extend our lines to the east and block off all the roadways, and we could have held them there. So what happened, we go around on the LSTs again, and we're going up the Sea of Japan, up to the east coast of Korea, to land at Wonsan. Well, Wonsan had the largest number of mines that they ever saw in a seaport. So we'd go up all day north, then in the evening we'd go south. We did this for 10 days. We called this Operation Yo-Yo, up and down. And then we ran out of food. And these, you have to remember, these weren't American LSTs. Well, they were American LSTs, but we'd sold them to the Japanese.
Hey, Bob, I'm going to interrupt you just for a second, just so that our the folks back home, as they say, could get a sense of what you're talking about. You land right here at Incheon, which is just south of the 38th parallel. You see the 38th parallel here, which had originally split the Korean peninsula after World War II, the Soviet-dominated, communist-dominated north, and the U.S. back south. A surprise attack, June 25th, 1950, North Korea attacked, expecting to take all of South Korea over very quickly. They almost do, apart from the Pusan perimeter here where the Allies held out. And then the amazing landing at Incheon, kind of far behind the North Korean lines. That was really General Douglas MacArthur's greatest masterstroke. You were part of that historic landing where we saw the ladders. Fought on, recaptured Seoul through horrible urban street fighting, the worst kind of, well, until you get to Chosin, the worst kind of combat I could imagine. And then after the Battle of Seoul, you're saying that the smart thing would have been for you Marines to have headed east
and cut off the roadways,
because the North Koreans were now fleeing to try to get back up the north, right?
Right.
They were taking this route.
Yeah, they wouldn't come up Seoul because they knew we were there. So they decided to come through the mountain area on the East Coast, and that's how they were getting out. So they wanted that stopped. But all we had to do was move our lines over, and that would have stopped them.
And instead, you were sent back to Incheon, put on LSTs, and sailed landing ship tanks, these flat-bottomed ships that you were talking about, sailed all around the peninsula and landed here at Wonsan.
Right.
But it took you a while to get into Wonsan because Wonsan was so heavily mined, right?
They had the best fighting outfit in Korea, out of business for like 2 weeks. And a lot can be done in 2 weeks. The Battle of Chosin was 2 weeks, the whole battle.
So you should have been fighting on the ground, you're saying, and instead you were stuck on this LST.
Right.
For weeks.
Then they ran out of food on the LST. We were eating cheese.
Jeez.
So
wow.
We didn't have to make a landing when the mines were cleared. There, 2 ships were sunk up there in Wonsan Harbor by hitting mines. And they, I don't know, the Navy didn't check it out, or MacArthur, somebody goofed up here.
Yeah.
And it was a waste of time and letting all these North Koreans escape back to North Korea, and then we had to fight them up there.
So you had to fight them again. So these North Koreans escaped back up to the north, and you had to fight them up there.
And they were never, the North Koreans were never a contest for us. We could handle the North Koreans pretty easy. And once I met the Marines, they didn't want any parts of us either. Of course, the Chinese didn't want any parts of us after the war. Yeah. But what scares me now, Todd, is we're like the same way as we were at that time when we weren't prepared. And we are not prepared for what might happen here shortly. Mm-hmm. And that bothers me. It's deja vu all over again.
The lack of preparation is stunning. I mean, considering that the U.S. had just fought this enormous war in World War II, but the demobilization was so immense and was so rapid that by 1950, you Marines didn't have enough equipment. You didn't have updated weapons. You know, you said you never saw a machine gun until you were on an LST going to Incheon.
Well, we saw it on a ship going to Japan.
Going to Japan, right?
Yeah,
Before then, you were sent to Incheon.
It was a 13-day trip from San Diego to Japan, and the first 6-7 days out, we were all, well, not all of us, but the ones that couldn't handle it were thrown up over the sides of the ship. We weren't going to learn anything in that time period. We were all seasick.
And your fellow Marines who were World War II veterans, they must have really provided a lot of leadership for you.
Oh, that's what saved our lives. And they taught us what we had to know. And it was like on the job training, and you just followed what they did. That's what you did. And whenever I got promoted to be a squad leader and I got replacements, the replacement would come in, and the one thing you never do in a combat zone is stand at attention or salute an officer. I had more trouble getting those young Marines. They weren't really trained. Some of them hadn't even been to boot camp and everything. You know, don't serve me, don't salute me, don't stand at attention in front of me. You're trying to get me killed. Well, that's what the officers felt too. So that was one of the hardest things. And then these young people, replacements, would like to bunch up. For some reason, when you're in combat, the youngsters want to bunch up, and that's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
Because they'll drop mortars in on you and wipe you all out.
Right.
So we had to holler at them and spread them out. But they learned.
Yeah, that seems to be the instinct, is to bunch up and, you know, the comfort of numbers. But the important thing is to spread out so that you're not all wiped out at once. Right. And tell us about Wonsan. You arrive in Wonsan, finally get to shore, and what the fighting then begins there in the mountains for you.
Well, not that quick. The first day we were there, we got bivouacked on a hillside outside of Wonsan. And on the way up there in the trucks, I spotted this farmer, and he had 2 pigs. And I said, man, that would make a nice pork chop. So I asked this one guy from the South, Roy Shirey. I said, "Hey, Roy, you know how to butcher a pig?" He said, "Oh yeah, we do that all the time back home." I said, "Let's go try to negotiate something here. I'm hungry for some good food." And we got on and we're negotiating with this North Korean. He doesn't understand us. We don't understand him. And we thought we were going to give him 2 cases of sea rations and for the pig. And he kept yelling, and we didn't understand what he was saying. So we called our interpreter over. What's wrong with him? We thought we had a good deal made here. What's he want? He says he wants the head. He wanted the head of the pig after we butchered it. No problem. You know? So you smelled pork chops frying. Everybody had pork chops that night on the hillside. But that's after we ate all that cheese and didn't have any food, you know. So that was our last good meal. Really.
The last good meal that you would have for a long time.
Yeah, until after Chosen. So we went on. We left Wonsan and went about 20 miles inland to road crossing, and we set up a perimeter there to block off the guerrillas that were trying to get back to North Korea. And that's whenever we captured a lot of prisoners. So we took them back to Wonsan to pick up our cold weather gear. It was starting to get cold. This was November the 3rd, 1950, and the weather at night was really cold. And we were still in our dungarees, and some of us had field jackets, but no parkas or anything yet. So we were going to take the prisoners back, not a platoon. it was the second platoon got lost our lieutenant. I was in the first platoon, and the second platoon drew the short straw. So they got to take the prisoners back. But they didn't want to, because we had a perimeter set up, we didn't want to take anybody out. We'd have to replace their whole platoon. But they figured by leaving their two machine gun sections, two machine guns, and all their ammo carriers there, they could maintain that part of the perimeter. And we're only going to be gone during the day. We'll be back at night. So they told me in the first platoon that they wanted our machine gun squad to go with the second platoon machine guns. Second platoon to take them down, be their machine gun that they needed. And we took them down. There was no incidents. We were hoping the North Koreans would start something because of what we saw in Seoul, how they murdered children, old people, and they were in trenches. And we came across them and we did patrols. And we found a lot of Army guys with their hands tied behind their back with bullet holes in their head.
Oh.
And that stilled us. We had no love for the North Koreans after that, after we saw all that. And we said no quarter. And that if we met them, we took no prisoners. We took very few North Korean prisoners. Don't surrender. We don't want you. We can't watch you anyhow. So I'm not going to let you go. So anyhow, on the way back,
I'm just gonna share a map of what you're talking about here. Here's Wonsan. Here's Maisonni. I think that was the crossroads that you were talking about. This is a 20-mile mountain road. You get sent back to deliver prisoners back to Wonsan, pick up cold weather gear, and then deliver it back, correct?
Right. And back here where the letters are, A, B, C, D. Yeah. Those are ambushes.
Right.
Those are all different ambushes on that section of the road there.
Right.
And A was us. We were the first ones to get ambushed. And
you were the first ambush, got it, on the road.
Right. And so as we're climbing this mountain, and these are all large mountains that we have to climb, and the trucks are shifting gears, and we're bouncing around. There's no room for us on the back of the trucks, so we had to let the tailgate down and rope in the boxes of cold weather gear. And so we were sitting on the back with two other ammo carriers, and we make a turn on this one level place when we reach the top of the mountain, and two North Koreans step out with burp guns and open fire on us. And I was sitting on the outward side of the tailgate, and the first two guys took all the bullets. They got machine gunned, and but they were rolling off the truck, and I just rolled off with them. And when I hit the ground there, I just kept rolling to the berm where it drops off into the valley. And I was kind of in shock. I didn't know what the hell to do, but I'm looking at the two guys. They're laying there with their eyes open. They were dead. And the trucks kept going. The three trucks kept going around the bend. And prior to this, I had made friends with the sergeant. He and I had a lot of interest. And he was a policeman from California, one of the towns out in California, Sergeant Hurt. And he was in the second truck. And that's where the machine gun was. And we were in the third truck. We were the ammo carriers. And the first truck had the lieutenant and his radio operator and a couple Marines. And that's where the ambush got bad. They killed all of them. And the lieutenant was killed. And the radio operator, Hurt, was shot in his shoulder. And but they were stopped in the road. And I found this out because I didn't know what to do. And I said, I'm going to go see if I can help them. I could have joined the rest of the trucks. The men came off it and formed a skirmish line across the road. I could have went there, but I said, I'm going to go see if I can help Hurt. And when I got a clear view of what the trucks were stopped behind some boulders that were laying in the road. And I said, I can get up there pretty close if I use the trucks as shields. And so I went by the third truck, and the second truck I looked in, and that's when I found out Hurt was shot in his shoulder and he was laying on the seat. And then the driver was like in the well by the brakes, and he was shivering, shaking. I don't blame him. But all their trucks were doing nothing. But the firing had stopped in that section. And on the way up in the second truck, I saw the machine guns, both the gunner and the machine gunner, and the assistant gunner. They were both killed. They were laying in on a road. And I said, well, I can't walk. I can walk everybody out, but except Hurt, he can't go because he's wounded bad. So I figured my best bet would be to get up there and get the machine gun and open fire on them. If the drivers could get these two trucks turned around, the second and third trucks turned around, and get out of here while I give them cover fire. And so I wrapped my left hand in some webbing that was on the truck, and so that when I held, you had to shoot it from the hip because you couldn't put it on a tripod. It would just bounce all over the boxes. So I got that all ready, and I told them whenever I get up, and I'll tell you when to start the trucks. So I got up and opened fire, and I told them to start the trucks, and they got them turned around. And I thought I told them to stop when we get back to where the other trucks were stopped on the road. But I guess I didn't, because they went right by them. There was a little pathway that they could get by them, and they kept going down to the bottom of the mountain. And near the bottom, a cart came by, and either a satchel charge or a grenade was thrown at the truck, and he veered off the road and headed down into the ravine. And I jumped clear. I was on the back, so I jumped clear when I saw this happening, and I went down into the ravine, and they were all unconscious. Everybody was on the trucks. So the other truck saw this through his rear. The first truck that was there, he saw this through his rear view mirror, and he came back for me. And I said, "Let's go. We got to get down to get help. They're both unconscious. I can't do nothing for them. And let's go down and report it." So we got back down at the bottom was where the 1st Marine Regiment headquarters was. Chesty Puller, he was there. And I reported to him, told him what happened up at the top of the mountain. There he is. And I told him, and he told his sergeant to get everybody together and get their weapons and let's go. So he got his Jeep and he lit off back up the hill. They must have saw us coming up the mountain, and the North Koreans took off, and they got there. So I went down and got the machine gun and came back. So when I got back, we got back to our base with the cold weather gear. I was the only one left in my squad that landed at Incheon. And so the section leader says, "Well, Harbula, you're the gunner, you're the squad leader. You're the only man in your squad." I said, "What's that mean?" I said, "I don't have any training to be a squad leader. I just got introduced to this machine gun." And he said, "Well, there ain't nobody else, and we're going to get replacements, and they're going to be greener than us." So I said, "Okay." So
hey, Bob, let me go back to Chesty Puller, because I think some people might be amazed that not only did you meet him, he was your battalion commander, correct, at the time?
Regimental commander.
Regimental commander. I mean, Chesty Puller's a legend, the most decorated Marine, I think, in Marine Corps history.
He had 4 or 5 Navy crosses.
Yeah. What was he like as a commander?
gruff, tough, but a good guy. He knew his business, and he wasn't afraid of nothing. But,
Was he a legend then, or would that come later?
He was a legend at that time. He fought in the Banana Wars as a PFC or a private down in Central America, and that's where he became an officer. He was a maverick, officer, and he went up to be a general, full general. So he was quite a. Oh, even today at boot camp, when the boots go to bed, they say they're told to say good night, Chesty, wherever you are. So they all say that now. So it was a legend, but he deserved it. He was a man of action.
Bob, could you remind people how old you were when you were going through this?
19.
19 years old.
Yeah.
19 years old. So there, where you kind of left your story off, is you come back, you get back with your unit, and they're all gone. Everyone you landed with at Incheon, fought through Seoul with, they're wounded, captured, killed.
Right. So
and
they
all
give us replacements. Yeah.
So they give you replacements who are largely reserve Marines. Some of them had not, you said, even been to boot camp yet.
Right.
They were rushed into this war, and your job was to train them up in a week or two?
Probably less than that, because we were leaving Major Need around the 15th of November. The ambush was on the 3rd. And by the time we got these new troops, people coming in, and we got our cold weather gears given out, we're heading for Chosin. And we didn't know what Chosin was, but it was told it was like a reservoir. So that's where we were heading. But we couldn't go with our battalion because we didn't have enough trucks.
No.
In the Marine Corps, because we're an amphibious force, a division of Marines only gets 6,000 trucks, where an Army division is a land army, they get 11,000. So we're begging, borrowing, stealing. Oh, we stole trucks, Jeeps from the Army, painted in Marine Corps green right there, right on the spot. But they had everything. They knew how to fight a war, but they knew the equipment and how to take care of the people that are going to be doing the fighting. Where the Marines, we were strictly sea rations and hardcore stuff. So we had to do what we could for the youngsters. And, I told you about the saluting officers, don't stand at attention.
Right.
Don't call me sir. That's what they're taught to do as a young Marine. Stand at attention, salute, yes, sir, no, sir. But that doesn't go on in combat. They don't, the officers know, and they get after them. And they really get after me as the squad leader if any of my men do that. And I said, don't you get me in trouble with the officers.
Right.
So
there you are, a grizzled combat veteran at age 19.
Right.
Instructing some Marines who might even be older than you.
Yeah, a couple of 21s.
Yeah, in the world of war. And it was that group who went then to Chosen together. Right.
And like I said, there wasn't enough trucks for us to get up there together. So George Company had to wait for the next truck available. And this was like about 60 miles from where we were. Major Knee was about 60 miles up to the reservoir. And these young guys sitting in the trucks going, well, we got trucks later. How we got out of Major Knee and the Wonsan, we got on board a flat bed train, old flatbed train, and that thing was spitting back smoke and dirt at us. And we had to breathe that in. And then when we got to Hungnam, they finally had some trucks waiting for us and got on trucks to go up to But about that time, the Chinese were starting to surround all the Marines up on the reservoir. And when we were going up this mountain, there's a road cut out on the side of a mountain all the way up to the plateau, and it's about 4,000 foot high, the plateau, and that's the Chosen Reservoir plateau. They made a reservoir up there, and they had a power plant running down at the bottom of the mountain. And so we got there on the 28th, and they attacked Hagaroo, which was our base, where the rest of the 3rd Battalion was. It was in the key town up there. It was at the base of the Chosen Reservoir, this town. And that's where the division headquarters was going to be. But we got to Coterie, which was the first town that you hit at the top. And then we were told that the Chinese had attacked, and they were attacking all up and down around the reservoir. And so they near the bottom.
Yeah, right here is Hagaroo.
Yeah. 3-1, that's 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines. That was where they were the security for that division headquarters.
Bob, so your first action here at Chosen is November 28th. By that time, the Chinese had already been in the war. They had crossed the Yalu River, 6 weeks earlier. Were you aware when you were headed up to the Chosen how many Chinese were there?
No.
No.
When they sent us up there, they had no business sending us up to the Chosen Reservoir, because it was in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the mountains. Our left flank was 80 miles away. That was the 8th Army across the mountains. Our right flank was 100 miles away, road miles. And we're sitting up there, very easy to surround you. Now, we only had 12,000 men. And our general, we had just fought a division of Chinese before they went up there. The 7th Marines fought a division and destroyed the division down at Sudong, and that's before the mountain starts. So we're telling them there's Chinese in this area. Our general was talking to them, and they wouldn't believe him and say, listen, get the lead out and get up to the Yalu River, because MacArthur wants this victory and get you guys done by Christmas. I said, but they said, hey, this is unsafe. We're out there sitting in the middle of nowhere, ideal for an ambush, to be surrounded. And so what he did, General Smith, is he built at different towns. At the bottom of the hill was Chinhagni. That was the first town. And at the top of the mountain, at the top where the reservoir starts, that was Coterie. And then Hagaroo is there. And then up to the left, the 7th and 5th Marines were the attacking force. And they had, they set up their defenses. He told them, don't rush. Our general told us not to be in a big hurry to get up to the Yalu. Slow walk it. He doesn't like what we see. There was herds of deer coming out of the mountains. There was long lines of people on the ridge lines that we could see on faraway mountains. There was a lot of civilians on the road, refugees moving out, coming down towards us. Now, something's causing that? That's a bad sign. And so he had set up these towns and fortified them to keep that. The MSR ran through all these towns. So there was a battalion in each one of these out of the 1st Regiment.
And the MSR is the main supply route?
Right, main supply route. And that had to be open. And when we got surrounded, then it didn't matter. but we had tight perimeters. One thing the Marines do whenever we get surrounded is something like the British square. I don't know if you ever heard of the British square. Well, I think that's where they got it from. But they'd form a square, and when they're going to be outmanned and outnumbered, and they put up pretty good battles, the Brits. So that's what he did. He did the same thing, only we had circles. Not, whatever it took to circle the wagons here.
Right.
And then we were tight perimeters, no gaps. And we were expecting the worst, and we got the worst. So anyhow, Haggeroo, that map, it was surrounded, it was attacked, and there was a hill there called East Hill. It's just to the right of the where the 3-1 Marine sign is. There's a large hill called East Hill. And that was a weak spot there. Well, George Company was supposed to be on that hill, but we were still in Coterie. And so Chesty Puller got a task force formed. There was a British company with about 235 men. We had 205 men in our George Company, and there was 190 men in another company, an army company that was supposed to be up on the right side. So he formed this, and the road was closed between Haggeroo and Coterie, and they needed reinforcements because they couldn't hold all this territory, all this ground, and especially East Hill. So Chesty put this task force together called the Task Force Drysdale, and named after the British commander of the commandos. And we went out there. There was 140 trucks in the convoy, no armor. And we're going to go up there, and the Chinese held all the high ground on both sides of the road, and they had thousands, and we had 900 men in the total in the convoy. And it was like a shooting gallery for the Chinese. They just poured it on, and we lost half our trucks, and we were stalled, we were stymied, and we weren't going anywhere because they just had too many guns and too many Chinese shooting us. And the commander, Lieutenant Colonel Drysdale, he called back to through the tank radio. He called back to Coterie and told Chesty that we weren't moving. Should he pull back? Should we come back to Coterie? And he said, no, stay put. There's tanks on their way. And it was 29 tanks coming up the mountain road. 17 of them got there first, and he sent them right over to give us a hand to get through to Haggeroo. And by the time they refueled and worked their way through all the destroyed trucks on the road, remember I told you that there's 70 some trucks destroyed already. And but we lost our trucks. We didn't have any trucks to ride in. All the available trucks that we had now were used to hold the wounded, and we put them on there and guarded them as best we could. And the tanks came, and we got on top of the tanks. They were our chariots that were going to take us into Haggeroo, because they had these big 90 millimeter cannons on them, and they could blast through anything the Chinese would put in front of us. We didn't have to worry about anything there. And they had machine guns on them. And so we kept the Chinese away from the tanks that would come with satchel charges. George Company Marines were on top riding them, and we took care of the Chinese that got close. And they took care of all the ones. So we'd been doing this for I think about 15 hours, doing this fighting and getting there. Finally got there. But only the 17 or 16, one tank got knocked out, and 16 tanks got through with us on them. And they put us in an empty field. There was no bands waiting for us, no hot chocolate or cookies or anything decent to eat, no warm beds, just a frozen iceberg. Was 30 below zero, and he told us to hunker down in this empty field and get ready for tomorrow, because we had no idea what was in store for us. Then they told us, and they called us, all the squad leaders, and they said, "See that hill you're looking at? That's our hill. We got to go up there and hold it. There's a regiment coming there, in Chinese, and they're going to take it the next day." Or they'd come at night. They wouldn't come during the day. So if you look at the map that you see it looking at there, that area right there is East Hill. And then we were down below, right about there on the left-hand side. And then we attacked it in the morning. So we took off and went up the hill, and every step forward, every 2 steps forward, we'd slide back 1. It was all ice, snow. And people that had been up there on the hill, there was Marines that were up there before, and it had become like an ice skating rink. So we had to use our pickmatics, our entrenching tool, and bayonets to make a footing to get up there. And we finally took the hill and got ready for the night, because that's when the regiment would be there. The Chinese regiment would come at us, and we had 150 men. Now, that's all George County had. And another 70 men were brought up by another officer. And the Chinese hit, and that was like about 3,000 men they had. So, and of course, we had artillery and mortars working, and those 16 tanks were at the foot of the hill on the left side, and they got to shoot into the flank of the Chinese, attacking Chinese. So we had a lot of help. We weren't the only ones there, but they overran our positions because my machine gun wouldn't fire. The other machine gunner, Dick Haller, he got hit in both his legs. He was shot in both his legs, and his machine gun was out. And without machine guns, you ain't going to stop anybody. They're going to overrun you. So they regrouped, and then the 70 guys brought in some more machine guns, and they took back the hill. But in the process, before that happened, they were overrunning our positions. And I had my 45 out. I had 22 rounds, 3 clips of 7 rounds, and 1 in the chamber. I always carried 1 in the chamber in combat. And I was shooting at the Chinese that were overrunning us, and I took my helmet off and started hitting them, some of them in the head with my helmet. And I dropped into a shell hole with several Marine bodies in it. To reload my last clip, 7 rounds into my pistol. And as I was leaving, and all this time there's star shells going off. So there was light. We got to see a lot of this stuff. And the voice I hear is, "Bob, don't leave me." And here one of the Marines was alive. It was Dick Haller, the machine gun, the squad leader from the other machine gun, and he was also the gunner there too. And I said, "Boy, just what I need. I'm going to have trouble getting myself out of here. Now I got a guy that can't walk." I said, "Well, I can't leave him." So I just grabbed him by. I said, "Now be quiet, Dick. Don't scream out too much. You might hurt." And I grabbed him by his hood or the parka, and I couldn't drag him up the hill because you can't make traction there. So I took him on a side angle. It was easier to pull him behind me, and I cleared a path with my pistol and got to the back edge of the hill. And then I start running, and we went down that hill. We were going down like a toboggan because the hill was almost straight. And if you got a picture of the East Hill, anyhow, we're flying down there. I thought we were flying, and all of a sudden my leg goes into an outcropping, my left leg, and a sharp pain went up the back of my leg into my head, and I went out. And the next thing I remember is him calling me, Bob, you okay? You okay? And I was coming out of it, and I said, yeah, I hurt my ankle or something wrong with my foot. And so I said, look, we'll go backwards now. So I grabbed him by his hood and was going backward. My back was going down the hill first now. And by kicking off with my right foot, I was able to get us going again. And it was steep enough where any little momentum would start to slide. And so we got down to the bottom. And the British commandos, there was a troop of them, about 50 of them, going up to reinforce George Company up on East Hill. Well, they passed, and across the road there was a Jeep. And good enough, it was my buddy, Jim Feemster. Jim was from 8th and I, and he was the company driver. And I said, hey, Mule, get that Jeep over here. And he'd come over with the Jeep, and we loaded Howler into the back seat, and I jumped in the jump seat. I said, get us over to sick bay. He's hurt bad. He's shot in both his legs. So we got over to sick bay, and as soon as I jumped out of the jump seat, a bullet came right where I was sitting into his leg, Feemster's leg. And he says, Harbula, I love you. You got me out of here. I got the $1 million wound. I said, you son of a gun. Not quite like that, but I laughed. So I got the corpsman and the doctors to take a look at these two guys. And as I'm leaving, I was limping pretty bad. And the doctor said, wait a minute, what's wrong with your leg? Now, most of the people up there were having a lot of trouble with frostbite. And everybody, they had to take their shoes off to see what was wrong. So he probably thought that's what happened. But when he took my boot off of my left foot, I had a knot the size of a golf ball on the back. And he says, you got a ruptured Achilles tendon. And he says, you're out of here. I said, what do you mean? I got to get back to my men. He says, no, you ain't going nowhere. You're going, there's an airplane leaving tomorrow morning. You're going to be on it because we don't want anybody, or the commander doesn't want anybody that can't walk. So you're flying out of here. So they flew me out. Now, I never told anybody about this. I got better in the hospital, and it took about 4 weeks, 3-4 weeks of whirlpool baths, and they didn't have to operate. They thought they were going to have to operate on it, but they didn't have to operate. It popped back in, and I was ready for duty again in about a month. And so they told me I'm going back to the troop. Everybody was down at Mason at the time. That left Korea, North Korean was back at Mason, and let's see, so I didn't tell anybody. Even when I got back, I didn't tell them about Howler being shot in both his legs and Feemster, and I should have. But when they greeted me and they were happy to see me, and they thought they had me listed as missing in action. And here the corpsman that tagged me must have got hit or something happened where he didn't turn in the tags. So they were happy to see me because they had all green men. After the Battle of Chosin, they were really hurting. So here comes the combat veteran back for them. So I got my squad back, and I hadn't gotten mail for like about 2 months. So I got a stack of mail waiting for me there. And the first one I opened is from my brother. and he was a Marine stationed down at Camp Lejeune. And he starts it off. He says, "Why didn't you tell me you were a hero?" I said, "What? What's he talking about?" I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody at home, especially. I mean, I didn't even tell the Marines what happened. Nobody asked me, so I didn't tell them nothing. And if you say something like that, you're tooting your own horn. And so my brother's going back to camp at Lejeune out of DC. And here's this Marine on crutches hitchhiking a ride. And you're smiling. You got the, here, see, ahead of me. Turns out to be Hitler. I mean, what's the odds of something like this happening? And my brother's telling me what I did in Korea, and I haven't told nobody. It was just amazing, just how thinking about that. What's the odds of that happening? That he's going to pick up Heller, and he just and if any Marine sees another Marine on crutches, he's picked up right away. So it had to be, he had to be right there, and that's how I got the story about that.
That is so great, Bob. I want to let people know this is Bob Harbula. He's the cover story for our summer VBC magazine. We send this out to about 8,500 households free of charge. Anybody who wants to receive it can receive it. If you don't get it, it's because we don't have your address. Let us know. We'll put it in the mail. We'll make sure you get our fall edition of the VBC magazine also. This is the main kind of advertising that we do for the Veterans Breakfast Club. So just send me an email, todd@veteransbreakfastclub.org. That's todd@veteransbreakfastclub.org. And I'll make sure that you get the magazine. Also, we love to do a survey after every program. We want to hear what you think of the program, what you liked or didn't like about it, and how we could improve. It'll take 2.5 minutes to fill out. Very quick. Survey Monkey. Sean or I will put the link here in the chat. Please do take 2.5 minutes and let us know what we could do better, what we could improve. We monitor these responses very closely, and we get a lot of ideas about how to change up our programs from the survey. So thank you for sharing your responses to this program. Let me open it up, Bob. I know I'm kind of, your story isn't over, but I thought after you've taken us through Incheon, the Battle of Seoul, Chosen Reservoir, your injury that you received, and then your return back to Korea where you finish up your tour of duty there. I thought I would open it up for questions and comments because I'm sure we have a heck of a lot of questions here. This is your opportunity to talk to a chosen Marine. I'm really good at stupid questions, Bob. And, my question is, did you get cold?
Cold?
Yeah, were you cold at Chosen?
Yeah, you didn't get cold, you were dead.
Don Nemchek, you have your hand up. Please unmute yourself. Fellow McKees Porter.
Bob, I salute you as a fellow McKees Porter and a fellow veteran. It's just an honor to hear your story today. Have you been back to McKees Port recently?
Not for a while.
Not for a while. Well, I'm telling you, we welcome you. If you ever come back to come to the McKees Port History Center, you tell me when you're coming there, and I'll be the first one to buy you a beer.
Will do.
All right.
I know where it is. Yeah, I know where it is.
Thank you, Don. Yeah. So it was so cold. I just want to remind him in case people missed this. It was so cold that your M60 machine gun froze, or it wasn't. No, it was a light machine gun, M30 machine gun froze. You couldn't fire it. Yeah,
they wouldn't eject the cartridge. It was frozen. The mechanism froze. Some snow must have got on it, and it must have been when it was snowing, and it melted. And when it hit certain parts, it froze up again. And you couldn't have oil on your weapons. We had to take all our oil off, and they're always telling you to clean it and put oil on it. But up there, you didn't want any water, any liquid, or anything. Let me tell one little story about how cold it was. This was the Chinese. This is from a Chinese commander, battalion commander. Captain, one of his captains came with his outfit, his company, on the east side of the reservoir, and he asked where he should go, and it was in the afternoon. Well, they don't attack in the afternoon; they go hunker down somewhere, and then come and fight at night. So he said, where do you want me to go? He said, well, why don't you take me over into the woods over there and hunker down until nightfall, and then come and I'll give you your job, what you're going to do. So make a long story short, it's time to go to battle, and nobody's coming over. The captain and the company isn't coming over. And the battalion commander told one of his lieutenants, why don't you go over and see where they are, why they aren't here? And he comes running back and he says, sir, they're all dead. A whole company of Chinese just died in a short period of time, froze to death.
Wow.
And there was many other Chinese froze to death. And this is one of the things that Chosen was, we had 4 enemies we always considered our enemies. One was the Army generals, MacArthur and Almond. The other was the cold weather. The other was the shoes that we wore and sweat in and froze to death, and a lot of guys lost their toes and feet. And the Chinese, 150,000 Chinese. But one of them turned out to be our biggest ally out of the 4, and that was the weather. Because if we had it bad, the Chinese had it a lot worse than us. And they had to fight our airplanes. We didn't have to fight any of their airplanes. We had air cover, and they were afraid of our airplanes. And that was the difference. It was 20 to 40 below zero almost all the time. Up on East Hill, it was minus 100 in wind chill up there. All I did was chatter my teeth all the time I was there.
Wow.
It was the coldest place I've ever been.
Mm.
And even with the parkas, and what happened to the Army, a lot of them got caught in their sleeping bags. They had poor discipline. You can't put this, you go with your body into the sleeping bag, because then you're going to die. You won't even hear them coming at you. They'll be on top of you before you know it. So you had to keep your wits about you and be ready for them. And they had, the 150,000 men that they surrounded us with, to give you some comparison. That's how many men the Allies had on D-Day, landing on D-Day on the beaches of Omaha Beach, 150,000. Well, this was the same size as that. And after the battle, a Chinese general, assistant commander of the Chinese 9th Army Group, he told a reporter in China that we went into Chosin with 150,000 men. After the battle, we had 35,000 effectives. They had 115,000 casualties. And we could have stayed in North Korea at that time. They had nobody to send against us. That Hungnam must have looked like a giant hospital after we left, because they never made any real effort to take Hungnam. Once we got down on the coastal plain and we had all these ships out there waiting for them, we wish they would have came. Now you're on our ballpark.
Let me go to Larry Woods. You have your hand up. How are you doing, Larry?
I'm doing well. Bob, I look forward to seeing you on Thursday night. But
we'll do it, Larry.
As impressive as your story is, the thing that always strikes me is, could you tell folks who on this call who probably don't know about what happened when you went for your job as a security guard when you got home? I just think that is totally amazing.
Yeah, so I got home, and my family was all railroaders, and I didn't want to work in the mills. I didn't want to work on the railroad, and I'm 21 years old. And I was thinking about going to college. But I said, I think I'll try to get a good job up at Bettis plant in West Mifflin, the atomic plant. And so I applied for the job. And the personnel director came and says, come back when you're 25. You're too young. After the five combat missions, the battles, the 5 stars I have on my medal, the Korean War medal, 3 presidential unit citations, and I'm too young to guard the Bettis plant.
Greg Yost.
Then I went to college, tried to get in Pitt and Duquesne. I went to both, tried to get in on GI Bill, and they turned me down. They said I had to go back to high school and get 2 years of English. And now I'm writing stories for magazines. So, and I didn't go to college. So I was doomed. So I said, this is it. That was the end of Korea for me. It was like a giant nightmare. But I'll tell you this, my Marine Corps, 4 years in the Marine Corps was the greatest adventure I could have had. I never appreciated a lot of it, you know, especially when I was at 8th and I and the things I got to do down there. And I was an orderly. When I came back, I was an orderly for a 4-star admiral, commander of the Atlantic Fleet. And all good duty after that. But I got out of the Marines because I did enough killing. When you're a machine gunner,
Greg Yost.
People.
Oh my, yes, thank you both so much, Bob, and also Susan. I want to thank you both for sharing these stories. These are absolutely terrific. I guess I have a couple of comments of a general nature and then a comment for each of you specifically and a question for each of you. Obviously, I think some of this sounds like it should be saved for Thursday, but we'll see what happens. One is in the chat, Todd. I put a map of the Koreas at night. And I think even to this day, this shows you just how much was accomplished by everything that all of you did, certainly Bob and all the rest of you. You know, Susan, your family and everything like that. I just find that amazing to look to this day, how backwards, look at, we can clearly see Japan, China, South Korea. Look at North Korea there. What an amazing impact everything you guys did is affecting the world to this very day. And I think that's all the people you lost and your sacrifices, look at that map. And I think there are a lot of people who never will know your sacrifices, who are appreciating something to this day, which I think is absolutely terrific. So, yeah. So
beautifully put, Greg. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. So I guess for each of you, I'll have a quick comment and a question. Bob, real quick. About 10 years ago, I was heading to a meeting, and I wasn't exactly late, but I sort of didn't have any time to waste. And I was on a 2-lane road, and I got behind a car that wasn't really going very fast. And so, of course, you know what that's like. And I looked at the car had a bumper sticker on it that said, "The Chosin Few." And I just said, okay, I can be late.
Yeah, right.
Goes on.
Exactly,
they chew
Greg.
me out for being late if I'm late, and part of it was my own fault. But this guy had the Chosin Few bumper sticker, and I just said, I'll live.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
I've been in a similar situation. Rick Arisman, how are you, Rick? LST veteran.
Good, thanks. Bob's already answered about how life was aboard LSTs in a manner. I wanted to know if he's tried or attempted any of the maneuvers of the drill team that he was on at the Marine Barracks, and what was his impression of Harry Truman when he met him.
That's a great point, because one thing that we didn't discuss tonight that is covered in the article is that Bob was part of 8th and I, the famous Marine 8th and I drill team in Washington, D.C. He volunteered for Korean War duty. Bob, could you still do parade ground tricks?
I can't even lift an M1.
Right.
That's too heavy. Scott bought an M1, and I tried to do the manual of arms. I was embarrassed. I used to throw this thing up in the air and catch it in the air and bring it down, and do the Queen Anne salute and all kinds of things with it. And that 8th and I found out that the drill team was started in 48 when I got there. They waited for me. They knew they couldn't do it without me.
I mean, the 8th and I, they're the best. They're the best drill team, probably in the country. Now, part of the mission of 8th and I was also to protect the president at Shangri-La, as it was called, Camp David, as it's called now. So you did get to meet Harry Truman.
Twice.
Yeah. What was he like?
Nice guy. I mean, you don't get too friendly with the president. You're a PFC, and you're in awe that he's even talking to you. So, but we liked his daughter. A lot of people didn't like Margaret, his daughter, and she liked to play the piano, and we loved her.
And sing. She was a singer.
I think so.
Famously bad.
Yeah, but she'd always tell the Marine on duty at the top of the hill when they were done using the pool that the Marines could have the pool that afternoon. And we loved her. And it was, it's 90 degrees, even on top of that mountain at Thurmont, Maryland. Yeah, so that was good duty, but we didn't appreciate it. We'd go up there. There was like 2 troops of Marines at 8th and I, and one would always be ready. And we'd go up and check all the bridges. We'd camouflage ourselves a day before so that nobody fools around on the road up there. And then we'd be up there living up with the Secret Service. We would share accommodations and food.
Larry Obrist, how are you?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. I worked for the VA about 35 years and worked with the POWs, including those from Korea. And remember one of the vets separately, who not a POW, was had a number of part of his hand and a number of fingers on the other hand that was from loss totally from frostbite. And I remember working with some of the POWs who battled in the mid 80s to try to get the VA to recognize what frostbite looks like 50 years after. And so a lot of them initially were turned down because folks, it didn't look right. But my last or main comment that caught my attention, that you said, we shouldn't have even been up there. And sadly, too many heroes are made in too many wars by ignorant and bullheaded command that create these crises. But I had heard in some other spot that indicated that we not only should have been not there, but allegedly the Chinese had warned somebody that they were going to hang on to the reservoir and was critical and had warned not to try to take it. So I don't know whether that's propaganda or not, but that I did hear that.
I had heard that they said not to come into Korea, not to go across the 38th parallel. They told the ambassador from India, they told the one of the heads of China that they were going to come in if the United States comes across the 38th parallel. And that part of it is true. But the VA at first didn't recognize the Korean.
Maybe 15 minutes tops.
What's that?
Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, they didn't recognize the residual effects of frostbite, how much damage it does. Even though you don't lose your toes, you've got other things. Your circulatory system is messed up. I used to get pains in my feet when I drive down to my daughter's house in Baltimore, like somebody stabbing me in my feet. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night with the same things, same type of things. And then they did 2 operations on my feet. And since then, I'm doing pretty good on the frostbite part of it. But it was very, very painful for many, many years.
Justin in Dallas. Hey, Justin, how are you?
Well, today I'm pretty good. Bob, my question is, in '95 in July, I was in DC with the 25th Division reunion and the opening of the Korean War Memorial. What did you think about that?
Good question. Yeah, what do you think about the Korean War Memorial?
It's a memorial. It's impressive. The guy's taking a walk out there, The one in Inchon, the memorial they have out there is so much better. It tells you the story of the war and who did what. And, the only thing I found on that memorial is they had the Marines with Army boots.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they had 3 Marines standing up there, and they had Army boots on. Bad business.
That's terrible.
Bob, the reason I asked the question is that third night after the opening, I walked down to the Vietnam Memorial and went across, and I was over there sitting with a gentleman named Lawrence. I don't remember his last name. He had been a Marine at Chosin and a couple of others, and he had his grandson with him. And we're looking at the pond, and all of a sudden this young man is tugging on, Grandpa, Grandpa, Grandpa. They're moving. They're moving. And he looked a little surprised. We turned around. The fog had rolled in earlier, and it was rolling out. It looked like all those soldiers were coming out of the fog.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Most sensuous thing I've ever seen. It just chilled up the back of my spine, and he looked at me and he says, "You didn't have the fog in Vietnam." I said, "No, but it sure was fun to have the rain."
Right. Bob, you may not be overly impressed with the Korean War Memorial, but this memorial at the Marine Corps Museum in Quantico to the Chosen Reservoir, I think is really great because it's educational. It's bas relief. There's a lot of description of the battle. You must like this one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Can you see behind me that the pictures up there?
Here, let me see. Yeah. Is one of them
General Dunford, Joe Dunford?
Yeah, General Dunford. You and General Dunford at that memorial.
At the memorial, yeah. And I stood in line, but he stand in line long. He came there, and I went up and started talking to him. And I told him that I was with Steve Olmsted at Chosen. And he said, "What?" He said, "Steve, he was my commanding officer. Steve was a private, and I was a PFC on that task force Drysdale. And he went on to become a lieutenant general." And Steve we were invited. Pat O'Donnell wrote the book, and Pat O'Donnell invited Steve and I to be guest speakers at the book signing at the Army Navy Club in DC. I don't know if you've ever been there, but all officers, generals, admirals, and Steve got up. He was the first speaker, and he talked about the whole battle. And then they said, "Okay, Bob, how about saying a few words?" So I got up, and Steve saw that I was a little nervous. And he waited there, and I says, "You're a tough act to follow, Steve. Here you are, a polished general, and I'm a gruff corporal." And he said, "Wait a minute." He got up in front of all these people, all these admirals and generals. He says, "I want you people to know he was my superior at Chosen. He was a PFC, and I was a private."
Isn't that amazing? If things had been a little different, we'd be talking to General Harbula right now. Susan.
Yes, I just wanted to affirm a couple of things that Mr. Harbula touched on. I actually have interviewed and known veterans who were just Marine reservists who were called up to the war, and they had no boot camp, as he said. He said they only had summer camp. they had never gone through actual Marine Corps boot camp. So they were thrown in there. And many of these veterans I interviewed fought at the Chosin Reservoir. And so thanks to more experienced veterans like Mr. Harbula, those veterans also survived. And the other thing I wanted to mention about was the freezing weather, of course, the cold temperatures. I think Mr. Harbula alluded to this as well, that one of his buddies he thought was for sure dead turned out he was alive because the freezing cold also froze people who were bleeding, Marines and soldiers who were bleeding. And so in a weird way, it saved some lives, even though so many died of the frozen, they just froze in their sleep. And so many died that way in the Chosen Reservoir. Sure. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on is that, I belong to the Arizona Chosen Few chapter here. That chapter has now closed, but Mr. B.J. Johnson and his wife was the head of that group. And many of those veterans that I would always meet every year at their annual picnic, I would hold their hand, to greet them. And it would be ice cold in this 100-degree weather.
Wow.
And, they always felt cold, is what they always impressed me with. Yeah. They never got over that cold. And so they moved to Arizona hoping the hot desert weather would help them. But they were always cold no matter what. And, I always gave them blankets as presents because that's what they always felt. And that cold of Korea never left them. So that is something that it was just really horrendous about this battle, is that despite the impossibility of fighting in 40 below zero, men like Mr. Harbula fought in the worst of conditions under the most impossible situations, being surrounded by such an overwhelming enemy. I really thank God that, Mr. Harbula and so many others I got to meet survived to tell us this was an impossible situation for them.
Right.
And so I just wanted to reiterate everything that Mr. Harbula shared so eloquently. And Mr. Harbula, you have just really educated all of us to all the details. And I just thank you. I thank God that, you're healthy, your memory is so clear because a lot of the veterans I interviewed, their memory has gone. So the fact that we can hear from a veteran like Mr. Harbula, who has done so much, who has endured so much, can tell us in detail is really a gift. So I just want to thank you again, Mr. Harbula. God bless you. I hope I have the opportunity to meet you and thank you in person. And I know that my words are not enough, but I hope you can feel just how grateful we Koreans are to heroes like you.
How great. Oh, great. Let's have George Hott have the last word here tonight. We're a little bit over time. Right. George is another Marine who faced impossible odds a generation later in Vietnam. You were part of iconic battles in Vietnam, including the Battle of Hue City. Thank you for joining us, George.
Thank you. Semper Fi there, Bob.
Semper Fi, George.
Just wanted to take and stop in. I don't know how many times we've shared our stories. That yours never gets old, brother. Still love you.
Okay, thank you.
Isn't that great? George, thank you for joining us to try. Of course, George would never show up for an Army story, but that's okay. I'm thank you.
They had their place in the ranks.
Hey, okay, I lied. Greg Yost, why don't you ask? I know you have a question you want to ask Susan before we leave.
Yes, Susan. Okay, predictions are hard, especially about the future. But since you know so much about the whole Korean situation, I'm aware that there are actually people who have written constitutions for a reunited Korea. Do you anticipate that Korea could reasonably be reunited if North Korea imploded in the next, say, 10 years? Do you think it would work? Are there important cultural differences that would prevent it? What's your take on the future of the Korean Peninsula, politically speaking?
Oh, Susan, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Okay. Thank you, Greg, for that question. There's a congressional bill right now that's been introduced in Congress for a unification of Korea, and it calls for the end of the war. to call it an end to the war in hopes to appease North Korea. But I think that is the wrong move. And actually, a lot of people who are more conservative in politics are opposed to this, which I am a part of. And it is really a false sense of peace that we're trying to achieve by calling an end to the war when North Korea continues to be so hostile towards the rest of the world with your nuclear weapons proliferation and without any accountability or adherence to any prior agreements they had made about their nuclear weapons. So for a congressional act call to an end of the war just for the sake of calling an end to the war, I think is really foolish. So I think we need to continue to watch very carefully what is going on with China, North Korea, and Russia. Those three have always been in cahoots together. And really, Russia is the reason for the war starting in Korea. So really, as long as those three powers continue to stay strong, I think it's very difficult to see North Korea being truly liberated to a place of freedom and democracy. So to me, the only peace that is worth working for is when North Korea becomes free, like South Korea. Everything else, less than that, I think takes away from the sacrifice made by our Korean War veterans and all who gave their lives there. So I think politicians should not be fooled, and I think American citizens should not be fooled into thinking that if we sign some end of Korean War treaty that all is going to be well. They are not changed in nature as a evil communist regime. And unless that communist regime implodes, I really don't see how true peace can be achieved and unify the Korean peninsula under freedom. So that's just my own personal opinion. I'm sure other people have a different opinion, but I think that's the general agreement of most of the Korean War veterans I've spoken to as well, and anyone who really understands Korean War history and the roots of communism, I think would be opposed to any type of peace treaty just for the sake of signing a piece of paper when they haven't changed their stance.
Right.
They're nasty people.
Thank you so much, Susan Key. You are an eloquent advocate, and thank you to Bob Harbula for coming on tonight and sharing his story. Thanks to the rest of you. Pat Hughes, you used an animated clap for the first time. I've never seen that on Zoom before. Thank you for letting me know that exists. Hey, I hope to see you all next week. For our open conversation, we can continue some of these conversations here that we started tonight. And also, of course, we have our commemoration event on Thursday. I hope to see you there. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Turn it off. Hey, Steve just said, what an awesome event. Thanks for the heads up. You had a lot of people on there.
Yeah.
Walt was texting me. Steve was texting me.
Well, there ain't too many of me left.
Oh, no. So you probably had more than you thought were on.
Yeah.
Because some people didn't announce their names and stuff. How'd it go?
Pretty good. But, that woman, that Korean woman, was pretty sharp.
Yeah.
They usually are.
Speaks very good English.
They usually are, Dan.
Where'd you go, Joe?
He wouldn't come out. I was trying to get him to go outside for the bathroom. And he did not want to do that. Ugh.
Hey, come here. Come on, get down here. Come on, Joe. Come on. Come. Come on. Come on down here. Come on, let's go. Go pee pee. Come on.